Hello music lovers, welcome back. This week we are discussing the topic of producer. You'll hear that wonderfully nebulous term bandied around often these days, but its meaning has become rather blurred over the recent years, and I wanted to make a video clearing up some misconceptions. Not because I want to argue semantics, but I believe a better understanding can help your creative process, both starting and finishing tracks. Also, if you want to make music for a living, it literally pays to know the difference. Let's go. Okay, here's a great place to start. Let me show you a clip from an interview with one of the most successful producers in the world, Rick Rubin.
Do you play instruments?
Barely.
Do you know how to work a soundboard?
No. I have no technical ability, and I know nothing about music.
You must know something.
Well, I know what I like and what I don't like, and I'm decisive about what I like and what I don't like.
Interesting. For some of you, I bet that created more questions than it answered. If it's not writing music or mixing music, what is production? Let me show you another clip with slightly more information. Have a quick listen to this interviewer as he asks the famous producer Quincy Jones, what did you actually do on Michael Jackson's tracks?
What on those albums, Thriller for example, is you? You know, you have his music, some of his writing, some of his influence.
But look, we take his stuff and take it to another level. Don't stop till you get enough. It's very well known that Michael sent me a note. Could you please take off the violins in the introduction? No, it's messed up my groove. You know what that line was?
And you said?
No way. You don't tell me what to do. No.
Who was right?
Well, what ended up on the record? That's one of the strongest parts of the introduction. Would been right.
Yeah.
Been right wrote that. This was a Motown arranger.
There, did you catch that? The last bit of Quincy's answer. He says that that famous string line was written by a Motown arranger. First of all, notice arranger is its own role in the creative process. But second, know that Quincy Jones did not play any of those violins, and neither did he write the part. His role as producer was to notice the intro was lacking in the first place, and then also know the solution. In this case, he phoned a Motown arranger and asked for a disco-style string line. He may have sung a rough idea to that arranger, but he didn't write the notes, he didn't record the strings, he didn't EQ or compress the strings. Now I have one last clip to show you to help us grasp this. Listen to this advice for new artists by Barry White. Just replace the word singer with DJ.
What is going to happen to the new artists coming in? They're going to have to come in with a different philosophy. They can't just come into this business as a singer. They got to come in with the intentions of becoming a great singer, becoming a great songwriter, becoming their own record producer, learning what the management business is, learning what engineering is. If it's possible, they can become a musician.
Barry was definitely ahead of his time. He knew the industry was changing and that new artists coming into the industry could not just be a singer or just a DJ. Listen to how he separates the roles as he explains that you will also need to learn writing, production, management, engineering, and musicianship. So I believe here lies the origin of our confusion. It's not just an industry change. The technology at our fingertips enables us and in fact encourages us to be all those things. A modern DJ or artist is typically not just that. We are some or all of the above, but oftentimes not understanding them or even recognizing that we are. And I believe not being aware or separating these processes in your mind could be hurting your music. How many times have you been creatively stuck or overwhelmed as a new music producer? Well, it's no wonder. You're taking on 6 or more roles at the same time, probably without realizing it. Fellow music realist and sage of chill music advice, Gregory Scott, over at the House of Kush, touched upon this last month in his video, Why Finishing Your Songs Never Gets Easier. Thoroughly recommended. You can see in the screen grab here, just as those clips I showed earlier alluded to, Greg has broken down what he calls a creative process hierarchy. with production there at the top. So, if production is not writing, if it's not engineering, if it's not performing, or shall we say programming in the EDM space, if it is not arranging, what is it? The analogy I like to use is that of filmmaking. Expecting a DJ or producer to be the one who writes the music and engineers the music is like expecting a film director to star in their own films, edit their own films, and also write the screenplay. Or let's take an example from the game world. The man on the right here is called Cory Barlog, cited as the man behind the games God of War 1 and 2. His official title being Games Director, but he is not a games programmer or games artist or a musician. His job was to maintain the overall vision so that those artists, musicians and programmers could all stay on the same page and work towards a common goal. So in the musical context, let me give you this example. You've been working on your break section for 2 weeks. You've got the best chords you've ever programmed, some juicy extensions which really get you excited. You've made a pad layer that you're really proud of, and you've found a glorious reverb and EQ to wrap everything up. The producer is the one that walks in the room and says, "Delete that. The track doesn't need it." Hopefully you can begin to see how hard it must be to properly self-produce. Because inevitably, as a beginner or amateur, be it musician or filmmaker, we typically start alone. We have to star in our own films and write our own scripts or music. It's not until we get a modicum of success that it starts to make sense to hire someone who is better than us in a certain field of expertise, like a mastering engineer, for example. To give you a personal example, before now I have been hired by a producer just to fix a chord progression. That was my only role on the track. I was not the main songwriter. At the top level, you find examples of this all the time, where a producer has gathered separate musicians for writing the melody versus writing the chords. And the person who wrote the melody is different to the singer, and the person who wrote the lyrics is different to the singer. And then the person who arranged the song is different to the musicians. Even sometimes singers have their own producers, just dedicated vocal producers. And of course, you're probably aware of roles like mix engineer versus mastering engineer. They are all separate people. I'd like to recall an excerpt from one of my previous videos, the Can I Turn a Loop into a Finished Track video. There's a section at the beginning at 2 minutes 40 called The Vision. And because many of us are often in the pursuit of how as opposed to why, I think many may have glossed over the importance of this section. Here is what I said. I had not taken my own advice. After ranting at you lot for not releasing your tracks, it turns out the loop I made for this video never went any further. So because many of you have been asking how to escape the loop, turn loops into full tracks, etc., I thought I would hit the record button and show you what I do to finish this track off. Let's go. Okay, let me introduce you to the track in question. Considering this was only my third video on rhythm, that bit is the production, the ability to step back with a bigger picture in mind or a holistic outlook is the role of a producer. As Rick Rubin said, be the audience. And this is a very recent thing for me. When people ask me the question, how long have you been producing? I'm not trolling when I reply, not long, because I don't regard most of my career as production. I've been a musician or an engineer for most of my career. The production came much later, after decades of working with good producers. When you're lost in the source of your own art, in things such as chord inversions, scales and modes, or digital EQ versus analog EQ, it can take a very, very long time to recognize, appreciate, and understand what production really is, and its advantages and privileges as a separate process. Okay, so most of the rant so far has been largely philosophical. Let me give you a practical example from my experience as a ghostwriter. Whilst we're on the subject of dispelling myths, the common myth of a ghostwriter is that we make a track, send it off, and someone puts their face and or name on it. But in reality, that could not be further from the truth. Not in my experience anyway. So, story time. After many years of running a recording studio, I recognised that DJs were making much better producers than, shall we say, a rock band. And the reason was simple. They spent a lot more time observing their audience. Given that a producer's main job is to make sure a piece of art translates correctly to its intended audience, you can see why DJs make great producers. And translation is the biggest battle, after all. So I started to take more DJs as clients. So what actually goes down in a studio session with a DJ as producer? Well, the first thing is that the track starts long before the actual studio session. It's the producer that has the idea for the track, usually generated from their experience of DJing live. And they bring that idea to the studio with all kinds of useful context. Context being something that is sorely lacking in many people's music when they sit down to just write a track for the sake of writing a track. Because again, most focus on the how and not the why. So a DJ producer's idea comes with all kinds of incredible insights, including audience, audience type, audience culture. For example, what country certain sounds are strong in, or what drugs are used in that culture and how that influences sound design and groove. They might notice what gender prefers what grooves, and does it work better outdoors or indoors? Do certain types of chord progression work better mid-set versus at the end of a set? What tracks are easier to mix in and out of? They can also recognize trends ahead of time as they emerge on the live scene. The list goes on, and this is all before the studio session. In the studio session, we use that context to formulate the track template. The producer will bring the best references for the context, and together we work live on beats, melodies, chords, etc. Ideally, that producer should not be able to play an instrument or understand an EQ, because they should be reacting emotionally as if they are the audience. So my job becomes to translate their vision into a track. Like I say, sometimes I'm just the chord guy, sometimes I do all of the music, sometimes I do the sound design, and sometimes I do the engineering. But every melody, chord, or sound I make is vetoed live there and then by the producer. Post-studio, we also get the benefit of live feedback. Whilst we do try to nail it on the first take, so to speak, sometimes we don't, but we do have the privilege of real-world feedback. And again, because the producer is not privy to the nuances of compression ratios or chord inversions, all they can do is bring back the feedback that matters, like did the audience dance? And if not, at which point, etc. In fact, if you're one of my viewers that isn't so new to this, and you're finding that even though your tracks sound great and have great musicianship, they're not performing as you hoped, one of the main reasons could be that you just need an actual producer, or at the very least, some real-world feedback, as opposed to your peers. So, to wrap this up, next time you're buried in the notes and the frequencies, try and take a step back. Get in touch with those emotions and think about your audience. Try not to be one of those who can't see the forest because of all the trees. As always, I hope you learned something. If you did, you know what to do to help me out. Also, check the description if you want to buy me a coffee and for any links relevant to the video. And until next week, I'll see you in the comments. Bye-bye.